If you missed your favorite show or interview, visit episodes on our website at theworldtoday.news. Our live shows are also on X, Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Kick, and Twitch. Now there really is no reason to miss out on anything on theworldtoday.news.
British punk rap duo Bob Vylan sparked outrage after mocking slain U.S. activist Charlie Kirk during a sold-out Amsterdam concert.
To an absolute piece of shit of a human being. The pronouns was, were. Because if you chat shit, you will get banned. Rest in peace, Charlie Kirk, a piece of shit.
This has been James O'Neill for The World Today.
If you missed your favorite show or interview, visit episodes on our website at theworldtoday.news. Now there really is no reason to miss out on anything on theworldtoday.news.
And a very good morning and good evening, wherever you are. I just saw the end of that bulletin from James O'Neill, band in Amsterdam called Bob Vylan. And they referred to Charlie Kirk as a piece of shit. Bob Vylan, the group, are pieces of shit too. So there you are. Ugly pieces of putrid. Ugly, no talent. I've worked in music radio for a long, long time. You are no talent. How dare you? Go to hell. Okay, speaking about going to hell, Alberta, Canada, they're planning now to get the digital ID. I'll play this clip and it'll show you that the Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith, she is just awful. Can play digital Alberta.
Today, we're taking another step to fulfill that promise. Starting in late 2026, Alberta will be the first province to implement the addition of Canadian citizenship markers to our driver's licenses and identification cards. This simple addition will have a profound impact on how Albertans interact with their government and their communities. Why are we doing this? Because we believe in making things better, faster, and more convenient for everyone. By including citizenship information on these cards, we're streamlining access to vital services, whether it's applying for student aid, accessing health benefits, or supporting those with disabilities. No longer will Albertans need to carry multiple documents or face unnecessary hurdles. This change means that when Albertans need to prove both their identity and their citizenship, they'll be able to do so with a single document. It's about reducing red tape, cutting down on paperwork, and making sure that government works for you, not the other way around. Programs like Assured Income for the Severely Handicapped, Alberta Student Aid, and the Persons with Developmental Disabilities program all require proof of citizenship. With this new marker, accessing these supports will be simpler and more secure. Adding a Canadian citizenship marker is also about protecting our democracy. Election security is a vital concern in Canada. By adding citizenship information to Alberta's driver's licenses and ID cards, we're taking a proactive step toward ensuring that only eligible citizens cast ballots in our elections. This helps safeguard the integrity of our electoral process and strengthens trust in our democracy. I also want to be clear that non-citizens, such as permanent residents, that still qualify for Alberta's driver's licenses will not have any marker displayed. Lastly, as we announced several weeks ago, we will also be integrating Alberta healthcare numbers onto driver's licenses, also in late 2026. This will also provide additional security around healthcare numbers, as we have learned through our refocusing of the healthcare system that there are more than 500,000 healthcare numbers registered than there are people living in Alberta. 530,438 to be exact, based on second quarter 2025 population estimates.
So there you are. There's Danielle Smith, Premier of Alberta, and promoted by the WEF, the UN, who, any other wacko organisation that wants to take over the world, control us all, and they are doing it, which is very scary indeed, just horrible. And just a quick one, because we are broadcasting from the epicentre of the universe and for intelligence, speeches, culture, Lubra lips, Botox bottoms, that place. Um, I sort of make it to point out something here that in Australia we have a lot of treaties being signed. In other words, giving back a great deal of the land to the indigenous population. One of those was Ayers Rock, which they changed to Uluru, and there's a resort there, and it's up for sale. And one of the contenders is a US-owned Journey Beyond company. It's called Journey Beyond. And they're going to sell it for about $300 million. That's the actual resort there, not the rock. So we actually have there was a bit of a crosstalk there. So it's a sacred rock. So what? We should be able to do what we like. We should be able to climb that rock. We should be able to visit it. Churches are sacred too, but we welcome you all to come in. But no, not there, not around Victoria, for example, in Queensland. The Indigenous people control it now. It's sacred. I mean, that football field is sacred. It's all nuts, isn't it? Anyway, my first guest, we're getting into, I've got to tell you, if you think Alberta's wacky, the new mayor or the contender, it's not a Rocky, he's a buffhead. That's what he is. Mamdani, his name is. I'm going to talk about him in a second. With Daniel Greenfield, CEO of the David Horowitz Freedom Center, author at Frontpage magazine, and the Sultan Knish. First of all, Daniel, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
I was just talking about some wacky things happening in Alberta and Australia. It can't get any more wacky or any more nuts than Mamdani. I mean, the guy's going to turn New York. I mean, it's already a fairly scary place at the best of times at the moment. He's going to make it. I see where he wants to release 3,000 of the 4,000 inmates from Rikers. I mean, nobody will be going out after 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I mean, it'd be a scary, scary place.
Crime rates in New York are already soaring, and about half of Rikers Island, which is the prison that he wants to empty out, are violent felons, which means these people are some of the worst of the worst, because in the past they've already released some of the less bad criminals on a large scale. They've been doing this for years now. There's effectively no more bail, which in the United States means that as soon as these people are arrested, they're out again. We've had criminals who have been arrested 100 times over the past 3-4 years because they're released as soon as they're arrested. So this is going to take the current conditions, which are already catastrophic, and simply create escape from New York.
Just wait 1 second. We'll just play Mamdani just to refresh people's memories. Cam, can you play Mamdani, please?
The jail population of Rikers has increased since Eric Adams has come into office by more than 1,000 additional incarcerated New Yorkers. And what is quite staggering to me is that we know that we can reduce that jail population to less than 4,000. I mean, Vital City had an article about a number of different proposals that could reduce it to 3,700. And some of this also just has to look at the average stay on Rikers in the 90s was 50 days. Now it's more than 100. There are more than 1,500 people on Rikers who have been held there for more than a year. So I do think many of the reforms that have to be made are also reforms around the court system.
Let's talk about Charlie Kirk's death. A great impact on a great part of the world. That part is something positive coming from something tragic. What I don't like, and what the many are noticing, is the amount of hate towards Charlie Kirk. Why does America at the moment, why does the world have enormous hatred for those trying to do good?
Well, because this is very much a struggle, if it does not sound too grandiloquent, between good and evil, between those who want to build up, create a better society, and those who want to destroy it, who believe that America, Canada, Australia, really most Western countries were created in sin, that they are fundamentally bad, and that they have to be thoroughly destroyed and replaced by something else. And those like Charlie Kirk who go out there and defend this idea, the idea that what we have built is actually good, that people should actually be allowed to be free and pursue their own happiness and their own goals, and that free enterprise or private enterprise is better than socialism, are violently hated by those who see them standing in the way of their ideal socialist revolution.
Do you find, I mean, when I used to live in the US, and been back many times since, but it was always, I mean, you could have a conversation about just about anything, whether it's politics, religion, whatever, world events, anything, sport. Maybe the sport might have been a bit touchy because people were very emotive. That emotion has transferred to politics and religion and world affairs and stuff like that. If you're looking at, say, Israel and Palestine, all that sort of thing. But once upon a time, you could have a emotional and vibrant conversation, and then you just let it go. Nowadays, it seems like, for example, politics, there seems to be this crusade from either side. How do we get away from this idea that my side, or I'm going to save the world, and the other side's going to destroy the world? Because with that attitude, and we see that in the States, and you see all the hate postings, and I mean, even in Amsterdam, I think it's an American group called Bob Villain, called him a piece of shit. And this is just terrible. The guy was shot, was assassinated. How do we get back the essence that once made America great, that you had the tolerance to discuss?
Apt question. One statistic I like to cite is that about 60, 70 years ago, the majority of Americans were opposed to racial intermarriage. They were fine with political intermarriage, with people who are Republicans marrying Democrats. Today, the statistics have almost entirely flipped. The majority of Americans are quite comfortable with racial intermarriage. Black, Asian, whatever color you are, you can get married, but they are quite violently opposed to political intermarriage. So people are self-segregating. There are plenty of stories that people have of family members shunning each other over political differences. And that really is what it comes down to, because politics has stopped being incidental. It stopped being a minor, technical point. It's become the essence and the entire purpose of life. And that is really creating a major crisis where people view each other as the enemy and view each other as being on the other side of this grand struggle that can only be won by one side.
We've had a number of theologians and professors and those that are quite scholastic, some and very, very well-versed people who have either studied Islam or have lived in the Middle East. Many have lived in very strong Muslim countries, and they are all of the same belief that Islam doesn't fit in with the West. Yet we see that, and by the way, I find Islam entirely fascinating, but I don't agree that it fits in with the West, and it doesn't. Now, what's happening is that we see that Christianity, which basically was the basis of the West, and for example in the UK, US, Canada, all those places, it seems to have taken a back seat. And what we have now is no tolerance or no care for other religions except for Islam. And part two of that, we have greater care for those that some would say go against the natural course of humankind. And I'm talking about, for example, sex change operations for children, teaching sex education to 3-year-olds, and things like that that wouldn't have been tolerated by our governments and those who are in charge, by society. And now, if you oppose that, then you find that a great part of society, government, those that run these organisations will attack you, will put you in a corner. How do we stop that? Because at the moment, Islam does not fit. We're trying to make that round circle fit into a square hole, and it's not going to do it. And we're not just making it up. It is just part of. It's just part of the world. I mean, it's just never going to work because of Islam's very its entire doctrine, its entire system. And you might get those either side that are a bit more or less stringent, but it still won't fit the Western civilization. How do we, because you can't stop it, how do we learn to live, or how does Islam learn to live with Western societies and their values?
Well, coexistence, fitting in is a choice. We've seen people from all over the world arrive, people from very different countries and cultures, and they make a decision to fit in, or alternatively, they make a decision not to fit in. Within Islam, not fitting in is very much a choice. It's a theological mandate, really. If you look at the teachings of the Quran, the subsequent teachings of Islam, their religious identity is very much tied closely together to the need for Islamic law, for Sharia, and for Islamic supremacy as part of Sharia law. Thus, when Muslims are living in a country where they are not the majority, where they're not living under Islamic law, there is a fundamental conflict with their religion, and the religion is not a minor matter for a lot of Christians, for a lot of people in the Western world, for some Jews, for some others. People are very secular. To them, religion is something they do one day of the week. It's something they might do on Sunday, but it's not something that is a fundamental part of their lives. For the devout Muslim, however, he is obligated to live every day of his life, every hour of his life under Islamic law, and that includes a political component. That includes not just, go to the mosque and have prayers 3 times a day. Rather, it includes the necessity to implement the various parts of Islamic law, including those that make Islam supreme over all other religions. Thus, Allahu Akbar means that Allah is superior over other religions. So that becomes a battle cry, in personal affairs. It also becomes a battle cry in terrorism. Is there a way out of there? Well, people talk about Islamic reform, but really the problem is that Islam has been reformed. In the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, the approaches to Islam that really prioritize Islamic law, prioritize Islamic supremacism, became dominant in Saudi Arabia, throughout the Gulf states. Those countries then exported mosques and imams that were trained in their particular approach, such as Wahhabism, to the United States, to Canada, to Australia, and to other places. Organizations like the Muslim Brotherhood that were set up to support Islamic supremacist doctrines became the representatives of Muslims around the world. And most Western governments accepted this. And that was a tragic, tragic flaw, because they themselves adopted and accepted Islamic supremacism as the only approach to Islam, while at the same time denying it, insisting that these organizations, like the Muslim Brotherhood, are actually moderate organizations, which they're absolutely not.
Zhoran Mamdani, he truly, and the word is that he stands a very good chance of becoming mayor of New York. Why would anyone truly? I mean, his underlying mandate is to destroy New York and create unrest and civil disobedience, blah 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 blah. Why would anyone in New York support Zhoran Mamdani?
There was a primary process in New York City that led to Mamdani becoming the nominee of the Democratic Party. Most people chose not to vote. So Mamdani won the primary votes of about 5% of New Yorkers, which is not a huge number. New York City also has a 3% Muslim population. So Mamdani, to win, really only had to secure the support of another 2% of New Yorkers, which he did. And since New York is pretty much a one-party state, the result is that the left-wing party accepted him as its nominee and continues to support him. New Yorkers have at best mixed feelings about him, but at the same time, this is really what happens when people do not vote.
J.D. Vance has named billionaires that are funding lies. And, I've been talking about this for ages. Just look at the ICE riots in LA, and you just had to go to Craigslist and you'll see there were jobs posted for those that wanted to basically create unrest and some sort of mayhem in Los Angeles, and they were paid, according to this one, about $30 an hour. And one of those was a lady from the Walton Empire. So it was quite obvious that and it's been well known that people like George Soros are funding lies and creating unrest within the US. Is George Soros behind Mamdani?
Soros has been one of the billionaires that is actually putting money into these organizations. We call them community groups, but that's a euphemism. In some other countries, they would call them quangos, for example. These are so-called groups that are supposed to help local communities and practice, of course, the leftist organizing machines. And as a result, they are funded, yes, by some of those billionaires. They're funded by also organizations like the Ford Foundation, which was originally funded by the Ford Motor Company money, as well as a variety of others. There's some of the wealthiest men in America, including Warren Buffett, has been funding it. Soros is also funding it as well. But the biggest funders, unfortunately, are taxpayers, because these community groups are funded by taxpayer money in New York and California and more liberal states. So effectively, the people themselves are funding community groups which claim to say improve healthcare or improve community relations. In practice, these groups serve as organizing machines for the left. And they not only interfere in elections, which they do in a very major way, but they also go ahead and start riots. They create unrest. They effectively reinforce the worst impulses of the left.
And also Obama, the word is he's also behind the mayoral candidate.
Obama certainly has backed him, and there are people even further to the left of Obama. The Mamdani's campaign is a result of the Democratic Socialists of America. This is a socialist organization, and these people view him as the means to push New York City far to the left. They've had a lot of headway in major cities, in part because a lot of people have stopped participating in elections. As I mentioned, only 5% really voted in the Democratic primary. This is not unusual. In a lot of more liberal areas, elections seem like a foregone conclusion. As a result, a lot of people have just tuned out. They feel like voting makes no difference anymore. And this provides a perfect opportunity for the left, which is able to mobilize small numbers but large turnout.
Now, forgive me if I say terrible things about legacy media or mainstream media, because I would never, ever think that they would be terrible people, tongue-in-cheek. The popularity of, or the perceived popularity of Zhoran Mamdani, and that's what we read here because of the Murdoch media. We look at X and you'll see different stories, of course, and different slant. But legacy media, whether it's throughout the US, such as CBS, ABC, New York Times, and so forth, they're all pushing Mamdani. But is he really that popular, or is this just some good old propaganda?
He won, it was 5% of the vote. That's not a huge number of people. There isn't a lot of turnout in these elections. You have a lot of politicians, certainly in the United States, that are widely promoted, but that actually won fairly small numbers of people. If the name Pete Buttigieg, a potential presidential candidate in 2028, for example, who was dubbed Mayor Pete, and he claimed to have won 82% of the vote in his hometown, which is true. The thing is that the actual turnout was in the single digits. So you have politicians who are heavily hyped by the media, who hope to create this feedback cycle and the sense that this politician is very, very popular. And Obama was one example of that. His popularity was actually very, very limited. But enough hype, enough media manufacturing, cult of personality stuff, and suddenly it seems like this guy is the next wave.
Okay, the mayoral elections, or the big day, when actually is it, and what about other candidates? How's the other side looking? Is there a firm favourite at this stage?
Well, I don't want to necessarily get too deep into the weeds of very local politics for an overseas audience, but suffice it to say the alternative to Mamdani was the former governor who had been forced to step down over a Me Too scandal and who during COVID had ruthlessly policed the state and the city and was responsible for the deaths of large numbers of nursing home patients during the pandemic. The second candidate was effectively a step away from a criminal investigation. That was the current disgraced mayor. So Mamdani seemed like he was the only alternative candidate. The other candidate was the current mayor and the former governor, both of them covered in scandals. So the conditions were very favorable for Mamdani, and the fact that the two opposing candidates were so disliked, also made it much easier for him and lowered turnout significantly. Now, we're hearing word that Mayor Eric Adams, the current mayor of New York City, is going to drop out and pave the way for the Governor Andrew Cuomo, the former governor, to be the sole major candidate in the race. this may only do so much because Cuomo's mention is very, very, very widely disliked. And this is a man who was already forced to step down from the governor's office. So I don't know how, for Mamdani, these are the best possible conditions you could possibly have because he's up against two widely disliked candidates. He's a non-incumbent politician, and this makes him seem like a wave of change. He can run on the promise of change, even if his change is basically taking New York City and running it into a wall.
When is the elections? And looking at, say, from the Republicans, who do they have running for it?
Swiwa, again, this is somewhat local politics, but if you at all remember the Guardian Angels, these were a group of vigilantes in the 1980s, and they became famous during the crime wave for wearing red berets, white T-shirts, patrolling subways, patrolling the streets, and trying to keep people safe. This was a popular move at the time. I called them vigilantes, but it's not that aggressive. They didn't, necessarily assault people, but they were just there. They maintained a presence. And as a result, people felt a bit more safer. Since then, Curtis Sliwa, who was the founder of the Guardian Angels, became a radio talk show host. He's reasonably well known, but at the same time, it doesn't really seem like his campaign is taking off. On top of that, he's running as the Republican candidate. And while, yes, back in the day, Rudy Giuliani was the mayor of New York City, he won as a Republican, but the demographics of New York City has changed. Among others, it now has a much larger immigrant population from the third world. It has people like Mamdani, who's representative really of a sizable number of Indian Muslims, Bangladeshi Muslims. So the demographics have changed to the point where I think overall, a Republican would not be able to win an election. So we have a situation basically where there are three candidates, neither of whom could win. One of them has now dropped out. Two of them are still in the race. The Republican is probably not going to, pretty much impossible to win. So Mamdani really has the best possible environment he could have for an election.
It's scary. I think it's a magnificent city, New York. And you went through some twos and fros during the COVID debacle, but truly it's a magnificent city. The people are quite resilient, and it would be a pity to have the whole culture of New York change. It's always been a funny. You watch it from outside and you think, it's a very tough, which is tough, but rude city. It's not. The people are magnificent, and some of the local bars. I have some vivid memories weren't thrown out either. Brilliant chatting with you. Thank you very much for your time. If somebody wants to find out more about you, how do they do that?
Well, I have the honor of working for David Horowitz at the Freedom Center. Our site is frontpagemag.com.
Daniel Greenfield, CEO of the David Horowitz Freedom Center, author at Frontpage magazine and the Sultan Knish, which I must have a look at. Thank you very much for your time, sir. This is The World Today.
We're today's news talk, The World Today.
And welcome back. It was a very interesting conversation with Danielle. Daniel was just stunning too, Daniel Greenfield. Be a great pity if New York just went downhill even more. And what they need is a very strong local government, strong state government, and of course a strong federal government. They have a strong federal government, not a strong state government, and definitely a local government that's just all over the shop, as we would say. Dr. Alison Goodwin has been a medical doctor in New Zealand for almost, for nearly 30 years, and doesn't look a day over 21. She worked in the emergency medicine initially, but has been doing general practice for the past 13 years, and is a part of NZDSOS. Alison, thanks for your time. From your knowledge on how many deaths have occurred in New Zealand from the COVID-19 injections?
Oh, well, good morning, Mike. That's a very good question. I'm not entirely sure of the answer. There are a number of official numbers out there, but I don't think that's the whole story. So officially, acknowledged by MedSafe, which is our regulatory authority, there are 4 deaths due to the vaccine, and all 4 of them are due to myocarditis. However, our Accident Compensation Corporation, which is, I think, the most reputable, and I think it's the most reputable, but it's not the most reputable, but it's one of the most reputable, is saying that there are 4 deaths due to it funds treatment injuries and what used to be called medical misadventure. They have paid out on 7 fatal injuries. So at least 7 New Zealanders have received money from the government because of death following vaccination. But the government's only told us a small number of details about 4 of them. On the MedSafe, so MedSafe is our regulator. MedSafe safety reports, when they had finished doing the weekly, then fortnightly, then monthly reports at the end of November 2022, there were 184 reports of death to the database. And the New Zealand numbers in the VAERS database, the American Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, they have got recorded for New Zealand 200 reports of deaths following vaccination. And so my questions is really, well, if we've got 4 official ones and there are 200 on the VAERS database, what has happened to the other 196? I personally don't think that those other 196 have been investigated to the standard I would expect them to be investigated, and there's certainly been no transparency around how they've been discarded or, how it's been decided that they're not related to the vaccine.
Why haven't they been investigated, and why isn't there the transparency? I mean, that you would think that's just a normal par for course. It's just something that happens. You investigate the death, you do it properly, not just 4, as you mentioned, 196 others. And the transparency part, of course, we all expect transparency. Your government and medical cabal, they're appalling.
Yes. Well, I had concerns as at the start of the pandemic, as the vaccine rolled out, I was concerned, what was going to happen if, as a GP, I reported a death after a vaccine, what process was going to go through. Were they going to, was the person going to have a post-mortem? Were they going to ask me for medical records? Were they going to speak to the family and find out what had happened? And so I contacted at least 6 different organisations to try and get a clear idea of what the process would be, and I didn't get a single satisfactory answer. So that was in 2020 and early 2021. So I then felt obliged to keep a good close eye on what MedSafe was doing with their reports. And again, it's not at all transparent. And I've personally been helping or working with a number of families whose loved ones have died, or else people have been injured themselves, and I've been encouraging them to communicate with MedSafe and ask for the details of their reports and ask for the details of their causality assessments, because that's what pharmacovigilance is about. It's about assessing causality. Did this vaccine, did this medicine cause this reaction or cause this adverse event in a person? But not a single person that I've assisted or helped or communicated with has been able to get anything sensible out of MedSafe. In regards to a causality assessment. They fob it off and say, oh no, the coroner determines the cause of death, and they try and conflate the cause of death with a causality assessment, as in did the vaccine cause the death, rather than what was the cause of death. And, and then they fob it off to each other. So Calm says the coroner does it, the coroner says no, the pathologist does it, the pathologist says no, the coroner does it. And there's a whole big circular, the buck doesn't stop, basically. The buck doesn't stop with anyone as far as determining did the vaccine cause this person's medical condition or their death.
Sounds like an old school cover-up, but how dare I even think about that? I mean,
that's what it feels like.
We know VAERS reported deaths following COVID-19 vaccination. It's very understated. Some say it's 1% of the actual, up to 10% of the actual true numbers.
Yes.
All experts, including Robert Kennedy Jr., have said this. That alone should show huge or play very loudly huge alarm bells that surely your media and the bureaucrats who are tied up in this, but surely they'd have to say, look, fair's fair. We've got to actually come out and call it as it is. I don't understand. Basically, I just don't understand the reasoning behind this cover-up, because it's there in black and white. Most people, if they look at it, just glance at it, you can tell it's not all as it should be.
No, you're right. We're in the middle of our COVID inquiry, our Royal Commission of Inquiry into the COVID, into lessons learned, and We had public hearings in July with members of the public, and then there was going to be, so that was a week of hearings, public hearings where people spoke and were questioned by the commissioners, and then there was going to be a week in August where the officials were going to be questioned in public. And so that's where I would have thought somebody like our pharmacovigilance expert, somebody like our MedSafe, the boss of MedSafe, would have been questioned in public so we could understand, well, what goes on behind the scenes? What causality criteria are they using? How are they determining whether someone's died of the vaccine or not? What happened? Just some of those questions we had hoped that they might get answered in that phase. But now we've got to wait till February next year when the COVID inquiry publishes its report. But again, we've got no idea who's looking at any of this, and whether we've told the commissioners we think these things need to be looked into, but whether they are and who's actually doing the looking remains opaque.
But they should be transparent, especially with the medical, from the medical side of things. You guys are you're front line. You were the ones that were seeing firsthand the damage that was being done. To have a February release for the COVID review, or whatever you want to call it, it's just like asking a cannibal not to eat the vegetarians, because we have your government is terrible. It's let me tell you this. I think it'll be swayed very much towards government. Now, why
absolutely. Yeah.
It's just terrible. So how do you get then a real report? Because this is not going to be a real report. It's going to be a piece of propaganda.
Well, we're worried that will be the case. This is the second one. We've already had an initial inquiry, and we actually had one of the commissioners was Tony Blakely, who I think is originally a New Zealand doctor, but has been working in Australia for a number of years as an epidemiologist. But, he was promoting the COVID vaccines, and yet he was one of the commissioners. And in fact, vaccines weren't on the agenda in the original COVID inquiry. So the current coalition government pushed to get the second inquiry, which does actually include vaccine safety and vaccine mandates. And so at least they're being looked into a little bit. But yes, certainly the questioning that Matt Shelton and I had, the implication was, well, how do we get the government out of this? Surely it's the advisors to the government that were the problem. They weren't providing the correct advice, and the government can't be liable. But to me, they're all sort of mixed up together. All these government advisors, they're part of the problem. They're part of the government. So yes, I'm certainly not convinced we're going to get a thorough report. And as to your question, what do we do about it? I think we've just got to keep on asking questions, keep on putting information in the public, hoping more and more public will ask questions, will chase up the deaths of their loved ones or their own health outcomes, and just ask more questions.
What do you think should be happening regarding New Zealand deaths and injuries from COVID-19 injections?
Well, if you were doing proper pharmacovigilance, every dead vaccinated New Zealander would be put through a causality assessment. Now, some of them, it would be easy to say, well, no, that obviously wasn't related to the vaccine because they're on death's door already. But others, a lot of the others, this vaccine can cause a multitude of problems, a multitude of pathologies. And a 40-year-old man dropping dead of a heart attack 2 days after the vaccine. It's very easy for pathologists to look at the coronary arteries. Oh, there's a bit of plaque there. He had pre-existing disease, and fob it off. But if you listen to Dr. Asim Malhotra, well, he documented he had evidence of his father's, relatively normal coronary arteries, and then shortly after his vaccines, abnormal coronary arteries, and so the rapid progression of coronary artery disease. But it's easy for a pathologist to just say pre-existing disease, and the family doesn't know any better, unless they've been looking into it. So personally, I think every dead vaccinated New Zealander needs an independent, completely separate from government, somebody who's looked at Dr. Burkhardt, the pathologist's work, who's looked at Dr. Uda Kruger's work, who's a Swedish pathologist, who knows what sort of pathology the vaccine can cause, to reassess all these deaths, particularly the ones that have been reported. But as you said, there's a vast number that have not even been reported.
Okay, here's something to think about. Okay, just say if there was a group of us and we all had the vaccine, which we haven't, I haven't anyway, and that all of a sudden people started to fall off the perch. They started to die, drop dead, that sort of stuff, sudden and unexpected, you might say. So if that was the case, if you were government and you had the shot, you'd also be very concerned, because you don't want to be one of those people that are falling off the perch too early in your life. It would suggest then that the government, which we know anyway, they had a choice. They didn't have to take the shot. So therefore, they're safe.
Well, I mean, I don't know in New Zealand. I mean, they certainly were advertising and saying that all MPs and politicians had the jab, but
They didn't have.
who knows really? I don't know what to believe there.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at Australia, they don't have to. They did not have to have the jab. They were exempt. Why would you? I mean, here's another thought. If you were a governing body pointing that country to a safe course throughout time, and this vaccine was going to save your life so you could keep pointing that country in the right direction, surely they would be the first.
Yes, you would think so.
And they weren't. I mean, we know that many government orgs and government itself, the bureaucrats, were exempt from the vaccine. And that alone, and then they say, but you must take it.
Yeah.
It's like, really? Can you just, before we wind up, because we are getting towards the end of the hour, can you clear up what statistics Barry Young was arrested for releasing, and what's happened to him?
Well, no, I can't clear up those statistics. I mean, he built a database. I mean, I don't know all the full details, but he built the database within the Ministry of Health to, I think, for the pay per dose people. So some people went to a vaccine centre, other people went to their GPs. So he was responsible for only part of the people who got vaccinated. But then, for whatever reason, in his database, he was asked to put a column to record date of death. And so he, as he was supervising, looking at this database, I mean, I presume other people were filling it in. Well, I don't know whether he was filling it in or not. But anyway, he noticed, goodness me, there's a lot of people dying, sort of, that got the vaccine and now they're dead, and this is abnormal. And, I think he sat on it for a couple of years, sort of thinking, is this right? Is this not right? What do I make of this? But, his job is database analysis and looking at it. So he felt something was wrong. So eventually he released the data publicly, but anonymized. It wasn't like it had somebody's name or date of birth or easily identifiable details on it. It was like a vaccine date and a date of death details. But they've accused him of misusing a computer or something, or dishonestly accessing a computer, some weird charge that he's on. And I mean, I think it's just, it's like all of these court cases, it's going through an interminable process that just goes on, and you have a hearing here, and then you wait 6 months and have another hearing. But, nobody's actually looked at the data, nobody officials looked at the data, put it in the public arena and pointed out, well, this is why Barry's wrong, because the data doesn't show at all that a whole lot of people died. I mean, my feeling about it, I'm not, I don't know enough about it, what's there. I mean, in a rest home, if you vaccinated 50 people all in a row in a rest home, and then over the next 2 years, all of them died, that may not be completely unexpected, depending on what level of care. So the age of the people, the level of care, and the length of time. If, however, you vaccinated 30 young people, and within the next 2 weeks they were all dead, that's highly significant. So, without knowing more about what the data is, I can't sort of tell you a whole lot. But, the court case is ongoing, and, the Ministry of Health could clear it up completely if they just released the data without, anonymised data, which would be easy enough to do.
I have to ask you something which is not related to this, but it is, I suppose. Because I think the vulnerable are open to abuse, whether you're very young or elderly or just older. And I always find it interesting that they still do, they recommend anyone under 65 not to take the vaccine. Many countries do that. Over 65, they do. Now, the reason why they recommend that you shouldn't take it under 65, because it can kill you. So why do they encourage people over 65 to take it? Because if it's going to kill somebody younger, 65 years younger or 50 years younger or whatever, surely as you become a little more frail, you become a little more susceptible to going to the other side. So why would they want to give you something that they know they can kill the younger ones?
Well,
And
I mean,
has not those defences.
in theory, they do a risk-benefit assessment, and so, the vaccine has risks, but COVID infection supposedly has risks as well, and so, the people recommending it would say, well, the risk of COVID infection as you get older, and I mean, 65 is an arbitrary age because there's some very healthy 65s and there's some very unhealthy 65s. So, it depends on your background state of health. But the older you are, the more susceptible to any of these sort of respiratory infections you are. And so I guess at some point, maybe the supposed benefits of the vaccine would outweigh the risk. But, that should be an individual discussion with your doctor, without the government in the consultation room, weighing up your personal risk and benefit with your health history. But I think we're beyond the point where it's obvious that the vaccine is not safe or useful for anybody.
No, it's not. It's sudden and unexpected. But I'm just thinking also, the other thing was as we wind this up, there was a study done that we actually played a clip from the US in 2002 or 2008, and it showed you that more and more older people were getting the flu vaccine, but more and more older people were dying.
Right.
Yeah. And so
it might be preventing the flu, but causing deaths from other causes. And that's the thing. They'll look at the outcome in these studies of did it cause the flu, but then they'll forget or not look at the overall death outcome. So that's a common practice.
So I always wonder. I just think once you hit mid-60s, take this. You're sure it stops the heart of others, but if it stops yours, well, you've had a good life. And it's like, oh, really? Anyway, just my interpretation of insanity, which is what government's all about. Dr. Alison Goodwin, if somebody wants to find out more about you or NZDSOS, how do they do that?
NZDSOS.com, our website, and we've got Facebook and Twitter. Couldn't tell you what the things are, but NZDSOS, New Zealand Doctors Speaking Out with Science, is the best way to get in touch with us.
And it's you're in a lovely part of the world, Hawke's Bay, with some magnificent Sauv Blancs there. So I would imagine there'll be a lunchtime sojourn to their local wine bar for one of your beautiful.
Oh no, that's work, solid work here. There's a lot to turn around.
I mean, if it was me, I've been walking past those bottle shops and going, man, that's a delightful drop. But it's only 6 a.m. Oh, well, live somewhere. Always a pleasure chatting to you. Thank you very much for your time. Dr. Alison Goodwin from NZDSOS. This is The World Today.